There's never been anything to equal shanties from the Seven Seas. It stands alone, head and shoulders above everything. There's nearly 400 shanties, I think, in there, in several languages. It's an incredible piece of work, and must have took years. People say that I think he broke his leg or something, and he was laid up for many months. And so he started putting the book together then.
Stan Hugill, Shanties from the Seven Seas.
For those who don't know, Stan Hugill, Shanties from the Seven Seas.
Stan Hugill.
And we used Stan Hugill's books. So we worked through, a bunch of shanties.
And I was given a copy of Stan's Shanties from the Seven Seas.
Stan Hugill was, interesting in his thinking to arrange his collection in terms of themes.
We had our use of Stan Hugill to see what the original lyrics were like.
If this is their first episode of the show, then they haven't heard of, maybe they haven't heard of Shanties from the Seven Seas. But I think that book, the Bible as we call it, is referenced on about every show.
The shanties that are featured in Stan Hugill's book, we tend to think of this as like, this is the canon. This is the music that's been passed down, and it's sort of from one source in a way. And what we're discovering increasingly is that's not really the case. In Stan Hugill's book, The Shanties from the Seven Seas, he seems to be getting pretty much all of his shanties from one of his shipmates who he refers to Tobago Smith. And the other one is Harding from Barbados. And as you guys said, that's sort of in the close proximity to St. Vincent. He makes a point of saying that it was the Irish merchant Johns that were sort of carrying these songs between New York and Liverpool, and then how those got kind of mixed in with the Afro-Caribbean songs as well to sort of, provide us with what we now refer to as the shanty kind of repertoire.
Practically every other page is, I got this from Harding, So Harding must have been an incredible singer. I think the sources as well as the collectors need to be paid homage to.
You mentioned Stan Hugill earlier. The people that he learned from, Tobago Smith, I'm sure his name wasn't really Tobago.
Exactly.
Harding the Barbarian.
These were not Stan's songs. Stan sang them, but I mean, he got them from great singers. In particular, his friend Harding, who referred to himself as Harding the Barbadian Barbarian, and so Stan did it too, which is not very PC these days, but it was how Harding referred to himself.
I'll be looking through Stan's book or through R.R. Terry or whoever, and so like, I like this melody, but I can't use these words for whatever reason. We can think of lots of reasons why, right?
Frank Bullen was the probably the collector, aside from later Stan Hugill, but Stan Hugill has later experiences. He misses the height of shanties. Bullen was right there from the 1860s.
People like Stan Hugill or Burt Lloyd, who happened to be there at the exact moment that there was a giant folk revival going on, and Tom Dewey was hanging down his head, and and everybody was into folk music, and so they rode on the crest of that wave.
But still, I don't think anything touches Shanties from the Seven Seas. It's still the one book you go to when you want a song, you can't remember the words of a shanty, or you want to learn a new shanty. Where do you go? You don't pick up anybody else's book. You pick up Stan Hugill's book.
Like I would rather not just take a Stan Hugill version and say, okay, I'm doing this version that Stan collected. I mean, sometimes I do, right? Sometimes I'd say, oh well, that's really good, just like that.
I only met him a couple times at South Street, but there was, I mean, all the folks I heard as a kid seemed larger than life, but he, of all people, just seemed epic.
He was climbing up the rigging in bare feet the first time that I saw him when he was in his 70s then. So he was vibrant and colorful personality.
We got very drunk on a bottle of rum, and I lived in the attic, so up 3 flights of stairs. He had to haul me up 3 flights of stairs, singing shanties as he did so, because I'm afraid I couldn't handle my rum very, very well.
My hair was long enough to braid, so I asked Lynn, Tom Lewis's wife, if she would braid my hair, and she did. She put a French braid in it, and she said, I braided Stan Hugill's hair. So I've got a connection with Stan Hugill.
There was just something about him that was unforgettable.
But Stan Hugill was there, and so this is the first time I'd seen him, and I saw him singing on stage with the backed by the Spinners.
He first did a concert in my hometown in Hartford, Connecticut, and Don Sinetti and I went to the concert, and he had his illustrations and boards and so forth, and explaining how the shanties worked, and we were just spellbound.
I went on an outward bound course in Wales, and one of the instructors was Stan Hugill, and he was instructing in sailing techniques and whatever else, and he'd lead singing sessions at night, and I was thinking, who's this old guy that can't sing? He knows a lot of songs, but he can't sing. He couldn't. Wow. I had not a clue that he was probably the last shantyman.
Stan, his vocal delivery and those sort of hitches that he throws in, to me, he's got what I like to call the saltiest voice of the sea shanty.
Yeah, but he got those from Harding. You see,
that's right.
Harding,
That's right.
Not that I ever heard Harding, but Stan says in his book, that Harding put all of these yelps and hitches into his shanties, and that's what Stan did. So I'm sure he tried to recreate what he'd heard. He'd heard Harding, this wonderful man, singing these great shanties with all the hitches. And so he wanted to do that as well,
Yeah, well, that's true. I don't think I can think of anyone else that's really thrown in hitches like Stan has. But I think in a way he's the most authentic recreation or representation of what the shanties might have sounded like.
Yep, Stan Hugill complained about me. That was one of the few times when I got told off, and I sang Donkey Riding, and he said, if you sang it that fast, the bloody capstan would take off like a helicopter. He said. And because I was singing it too fast.
He was an accomplished, self-taught artist.
I hope one day that they hang one in an Academy of Marine Art in London, and so Stan's always hoped that they would hang one of his pictures in there one day. But there's lots of stuff in his house. There's a wonderful painting on the wall in his house where his widow Bron still lives, in Aberdyfi in Wales. And he painted it on a bed sheet in the prisoner of war camp when he was prisoner of war in Germany, and it's a fantastic painting. It's a picture of Captain Henry Morgan's sacking of Panama City, and there's all these pirates with half-naked wenches over their shoulders and booze in their hands, raping and pillaging in Panama, the Cup of Gold, and so he put on a play to that effect when he was in prisoner of war camp, and. One of his fellow prisoners turned up at one of the concerts we did once. A very emotional reunion because they hadn't seen each other since 1945. And he said he owed everything to Stan because Stan had got him involved in singing and acting and doing these plays that Stan used to put on, just to keep them all occupied. And he says, and now I'm a professional actor. And he says, when I came home, I gave up my job and became an actor. And he says, I owe it all to this man, I mean, he spoke, and as I've told many people, he spoke, I think, 12 languages. And all self-taught because he left school at 14. So he had no education to speak of. Wow.
I was over in the UK a few years ago, and I went on a bit of a Stan Hugill pilgrimage. I went to Hoylake, which where he was born, outside of Liverpool, and I tried to find the exact cottage where he was actually born, which no longer exists, but there was an RNLI station there too. And I believe his dad worked for the RNLI, and they do a lot of incredible work. It's a group that I really have a lot of admiration for.
And he said, Stan Hugill's going to sing in Maine next year. So I said, great, I will be there. And about 3 weeks before, I got an email from Bob saying, you don't have to come. Unfortunately, Stan died. So I came so close to meeting Stan Hugill, but didn't. And he had the reputation to be the shantyman who sang the last shanty aboard a British square rigger. And that was a four-masted bark called the Garth Pool. But she was actually owned in Canada at the time. So he sang a sea shanty aboard the last big British square rigger owned in Canada.
Wow.
And on the very next day, on November 11th, is the anniversary of the wreck of the ship that Stan Hugill, who we mention often in the episodes, sailed in. It's called the Garth Pool. And that she was wrecked in 1929. She was the last commercial square rigger still in operation.
Stan's 100th birthday, what would have been his 100th birthday, because he died
2006.
when he was 86. But so we had a 100th birthday for Stan in Liverpool, and people came from all over the world, you know, and it was an amazing birthday. And so to celebrate Stan's 100th birthday, they compiled all of the Bosun's Locker articles into a book, and so that was a very special thing, yeah.
We also have a little bit of news in that this is our second last episode of season 1. So our next episode will be with Martin Hugill, son of the guy you may have heard of, Stan Hugill. Yeah, so if you like what you've just seen, it really does help us if you hit that like and subscribe button. It'll also keep you posted on upcoming episodes so you don't miss a thing.